Hello, everybody. It is me once again, Daniel X. Belasco from Glass Apple Bonzai, and I'm here bringing you yet another video of me doing things in the computer, on the grid, in the box. One of the questions that I get often is asking people how I achieve the particular snare drum sounds that I have throughout the Glass Apple Bonzai recordings. Snare drums have always been a very important aspect of percussion to me in sort of more the low meaty end of things, which was a big thing in the 80s. I mean, perfect example is Oh No It's Devo by Devo. It's obviously a LINN drum, and it's just this, fat, thwappy, meaty thing that it's a sound that I've grown to love over the years, and always have been very particular about the types of snare drums that I use in terms of their fatness. I don't really like high snappy snare drums. Some people do. Some people like, the bass synths or bass guitar and the kick drum to sort of dominate the low end, and the snare drum to be more in the mid to higher range. But I don't like that. No, I prefer to go full tilt with the fat snare drummage. So let's get started. One of the plugins that I've been using a lot recently is this one right here, the VLINN. It is a software emulation of the LM1 drums, the whole drum machine, the way it works, its detuning algorithms, everything. And it's made by Aly James, Aly James Lab. And it's one of the better purchases in the soft synth world that I've made in a long time, because it's very versatile in its routing of the drums. As you can see, I have kick drum, clap, snare drum, and hi-hats all routed to separate channels, which is something that I do all the time. I route every single percussion element, has its own channel to give me the full amount of control that I want over what it is that I'm doing. And then I can submix those to another channel that has like a tape saturation emulator on it, or a compressor, or even another reverb to sort of give it a little bit more space. But the tape saturation thing is kind of what I've been doing a lot lately, so I'll do that eventually. But right now, let's focus on the snare drum. Now, the cool thing about the VLINN here is that it has individual detune for each of the percussion elements. Now, if you know anything about the way that the LINN drum, the LM1 and the LM2 and all of those all worked, there's a very distinct way that it would detune the samples in it, and it had a very unique sound due to that. A perfect example is basically, I think, like everything that Prince did in the 80s was all LINN drum. Like it had the rim shot, so you turn that down. Yeah, so in the clap, of course, it's just a really unique instrument, and Mr. Aly James here has captured that quite well, so why not use it? So let's head over to the snare drum here. As you can see, it has the ability to be detuned, which I absolutely love, because then I can get that fat, meaty, low bit rate sample dirtiness that I absolutely love. Now, sometimes I've been known to start off by adding a compression to the snare, which you don't really need to do with something like this, because it doesn't really do much. It brings out every little bit of the sound, which might be something that you want to do if you just want to give it, that, because this plugin, specifically the TC Works compressor de-esser, has a soft saturation built into it. So if you jack it up, you can even use the de-esser to your advantage to cut out any like high-end artifacting or whatever. But we'll just leave that off for now and maybe try it later. So the next step for me is always a reverb. And I just use the Fruity reverb built into FL Studio, and it's been the same for, I don't know, a billion years. I think they introduced it probably in like Fruity Loops 3 or 4 or something. And I have no problems getting the sound out of it that I want. Everybody has favorite plugins or hardware or whatever that they will always turn to just because they always like the sound of it, or they know the interface of it so well that instead of wasting time trying to figure out how to get the sound that you want from something that may or may not sound better, you can take seconds to dial up the sound that you want, and it's good enough. You know, recording isn't a competition, it's a science project. So do whatever the hell you want to. Right, so I usually give myself a big room size, somewhere in the 70s, maybe even 100. No, maybe like 73. Bring the pre-delay up. I mean, all right, cut the low end to about, I don't know, because you don't really want it to carry too much of that boominess over, because then it gets muddy and stupid. You can bring the decay down to like a second, and you can bring the reverb level up to, I don't know, bring it up a little high for right now, because you want to dial stuff back later as you're making your snare. So we'll get the high dampening up into the higher regions, so you get some of that air from the reverb. And yeah, so that's a good start for the reverb. Now the next step for me is a noise gate, because I like gated reverbs. So we'll use the gate snare plugin, or the gate snare preset for the Floorfish plugin. Switch it to stereo, and you can already hear it's sort of doing what I want. That's a little too quick. All right. That's basically good enough. I mean, you can... Yeah. All right. There we go. So then we can take the reverb level down. I don't know, to about there. And you can maybe even bring your pre-delay back and start shrinking the room size. You know, it all depends on what kind of sound you're going for. Like, if you want those classic sort of big ballad snare drums, you'd have a pretty big reverb on that, because you're usually at a lower tempo, and it has time to hang out. But if you want to do something fast, you don't want it to be absolutely ridiculous and out of control. Plus, also, you tailor all of these things and tweak them as you're building the song, because you'll find that it might stand out too much, or once the song starts to get busy, the reverb starts to disappear, and you want to bring the level of that up, of course. All right, next step here is an EQ. You can do whatever you want. You can use parametric, you can use graphic, you can use whatever. There's like an endless sea of EQs out there. I just use the parametric EQ2 that's built into FL Studio, because I like the interface and that it shows me what I'm looking for. So I'll actually give this a pretty sharp cutoff, because there's really no point to me for the snare to be sounding anything down here in this range whatsoever. All right, so we can focus in on where you can see where the beefiness of it is, and I'll just sort of, maybe like a dB or just over a dB of boost. That might even be too much. It's going to be a 0.9 dB boost. You can duck out some there, whatever, and you can take off some of the absolute high end. If you're going for like a true retro sound, the snares didn't really have a capital amount of high end to them. Well, not the stuff that I listened to anyways. There was always sort of a dullness to them, which was nice. You can accentuate that, or you can do whatever the hell you want. And it changes as you build the song, of course. Here we're listening to the snare drum in a completely isolated environment, which is never really how you're going to hear it. you know, unless you have a drum intro. But even then, it's going to very quickly come into something else that's far more busy. And then a lot of the characteristics will just, you know, vanish into the sonic ether that is the song that you have. So we, you know, I might even detune the snare just a little bit more. Or maybe just leave it there, I guess. That's okay, right? Now, just for the sake of completion here, I need to add a little bit of a reverb to the hand clap. Of course, not that. I use reverb presets a lot, you know, because presets are a good starting point for basically anything. You know what? Fuck this. I'll use the plugin that I normally use. And just bring the decay down to like... Got some of the... There we go. I'll bring that down in the mix. So if I want to make a preliminary sort of simple drum beat, let's do something real simple here, just to show you what I'm talking about. All right, so we'll highlight these. I'll do that typical drum pattern that I do, and now you see as it's playing, the reverb's sticking out. It's a good way to... There we go. You're going to add a little verb to the kick drum. We'll use the reverb too. We'll just do the... Yeah. I can even bring like that. Yeah, whatever. That's nothing special. Well, the drum line it is, but you know, you can hear where I'm going with the snare drum. I mean, it's big. Yeah. All right, now let's try another one here. Another drum element that I use a lot is the Roland Era TR-8 with the 707 set of sounds. I like, my preference in terms of drum machines is all of the sample-based ones that came out in the early 80s and so on. And the TR-505 and the TR-707 and the, you know, the VLINN drum and all of that stuff. And like the DMX and shit. So, because I don't want to fire up the TR-8 right now, and I really can't show you too much in this, you know, like I do it, it's all on hardware. So I'll show you how I can get something similar using a 707 snare sample. Now, first step is usually always tune it to something, right? That sounds good right there. And it's a fairly simple, it's fairly sort of similar to the way that I started things before, but sometimes with samples, I'll choose to compress them so that I get a little bit more of a thwappiness to them. That's the term that I want to use, thwap, right? Just so they have a sort of a little bit more of a snap to them. And then, of course, right to the reverb. Right, obviously not the reverb that I want right away. So we'll cut up to like, I don't know, 250. Bring the verb level down. Bring the decay down even more. Maybe bring the room size up. Okay, I like that right there. All right, then we'll open up an EQ and kind of treat it the same. Usually with samples that have like a lot of like shitty sort of high-end artifacting, and I want to get rid of that and duck out the around the 1K. Probably not that much, but depends on what you're going for. Maybe bring down that low boosting just to about a... Right, so... Yeah, I mean, there we go. There's... Oops. And we'll replace this snare drum with that, and we'll play it along. Now, here's a fun trick. The cool thing about Fruity Loops, or FL Studio, my apologies, is that it lets you subgroup your channels. We'll route them all to one channel. It's kind of, I know there's a quicker way to do this, but I'm not going to do it the quick way because I want anybody who watches this to see what I'm doing and understand it. So now they all come out of one channel. I can bring that channel down a little bit. And I will take this tape saturation emulator that I have called the Ferox and boost the saturation to, I don't know, like 28%. And it gives it that, you know, that good tape overdrive distortion. You can, you know, jack the recording level up just to get it a little bit hotter. You can also change the tape speed percent, your low cutoff and high cutoff, and you can also add tape noise. You know, so there you've got a drum beat, and you know what? I'll fire off a plugin real quick. We'll use the Poly 6 just because it has an arpeggiator built into it. We'll go to 1/8 and... This fucking plugin hates me here. I have some weird latency issues right now with my shit. Hey, what are you doing there, buddy? It's being really weird right now. Oh, I know why. And we'll fire up some. Right. So that's a couple of snare drums in the style of Glass Apple Bonzai. Thanks for watching, and I will do more of these very soon.